What does it mean to be a chosen one? To be destined for greatness, yet still human enough to feel desire, temptation, and moral conflict? Today, we're exploring a struggle rarely talked about: how heroes, prophets, and leaders wrestle with sexuality, morality, and the heavy weight of expectation. We'll look at myths, religions, psychology, and modern life to understand why desire can feel dangerous for the chosen, how the gaze of others can amplify guilt, and whether it's possible to balance a sacred mission with a human heart. This is the inner world of the chosen one, a journey through morality, intimacy, and the tension between power, responsibility, and human longing. The chosen one archetype and why sex and morality clash for them. The chosen one is a powerful storytelling archetype, someone singled out by fate, prophecy, divine will, destiny, or exceptional talent. That selection brings privileges, agency, followers, narrative importance, and burdens, expectations, scrutiny, loneliness. Sexuality sits at the intersection of bodily impulses, private identity, relational intimacy, and cultural taboos, so it becomes a pressure point for anyone under extraordinary expectations. Sources of the struggle: heightened moral expectations. Communities tend to hold their chosen to stricter standards. Imperfect behavior risks betraying the cause. Sex, especially when it involves secrecy, ambivalence, or cultural taboos, becomes a potential moral landmine. Identity fragmentation. A chosen person often has two selves: the human with needs, doubts, fears, and the ideal self others project onto them. Sexual desire is intimate and embodied. Expressing it can feel like betraying the sacred role, or conversely, suppressing it can feel dehumanizing. Power dynamics and consent complications. Being chosen confers status and influence. Partners, or would-be partners, may be attracted to the role rather than the person. That skews genuine consent and complicates ethical sexual behavior. Isolation and secrecy. Chosen figures are often isolated: literal exile, secret training, inner circle. That scarcity of genuine companionship can lead to risky or morally ambiguous sexual choices driven by loneliness. Temptation narratives embedded in culture/religion. Many religious and mythic traditions frame sexual temptation as a test for the chosen. That narrative can intensify guilt and shame around normal sexual feelings. Symbolic purity versus human need. In many traditions, sexual restraint is equated with purity, holiness, or focus. The chosen must balance practical human needs, intimacy, love, reproduction, with symbolic expectations. Psychological impact on the chosen one. Shame and secrecy. Because desires feel disallowed, they may be hidden, creating shame spirals. Shame often fuels secrecy, which increases risky decisions. Compartmentalization. To function, many compartmentalize sexuality, private, from duty, public. Over time, that can erode cohesion and lead to emotional dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. Believing in a sacred mission while acting against its moral code can create crippling inner conflict, depression, or reactive behaviors. Hypervigilance. Fear of exposure makes relationships superficial and transactional. Chosen people may constantly monitor their behavior and others' motives. Projection and idealization. Partners may idealize the chosen, projecting their own needs. The chosen may accept relationships that are more about fulfilling others' fantasies than mutual care. Ethical dimensions. Consent in asymmetrical relationships. If a follower seeks intimacy, can the chosen person ever give full, uncoerced consent? Power imbalance complicates autonomy. Ethically, the chosen one must evaluate if the other's consent is free from coercion by status. Responsibilities to community versus personal autonomy. Is there moral justification for sacrificing personal intimacy to maintain the public mission? Conversely, is enforced celibacy or shaming ever ethically justifiable? Transparency and honesty. Ethical navigation often requires honesty with oneself, partners, and, to the extent possible, one's community about limits, intentions, and boundaries. Non-monogamy versus monogamy debates. Some chosen individuals adopt non-traditional relationship structures to reconcile desire and duty. These can be ethical if all parties consent and communication is robust. Cultural and religious variations. Religious asceticism. Some faiths valorize chastity for spiritual focus. The chosen are expected to turn away from sexual life. This can be liberating for those who feel called, damaging for those who don't. Heroic sexuality in myth. In other myths, heroes' sexual liaisons symbolize alliances, fertility, or transgression, sometimes empowering, sometimes destructive. Modern secular chosen. In contemporary contexts, celebrities, political leaders, tech founders, the chosen archetype shifts into public scrutiny. Sex scandals are moral spectacles, and the chosen's private life is subject to public moralizing. Intersectionality. Race, gender, class, and sexual orientation shape how chosen figures experience these tensions. A queer chosen one, for instance, may face specific moral policing or internalized shame not faced by heterosexual counterparts. Practical coping strategies, ethical, psychological, relational. Create ethical decision rules. A chosen person can establish personal principles for sexual behavior, e.g., avoid relationships with direct subordinates or followers. Insist on counseling before entering significant intimacy to guard against coercion and moral ambiguity. Seek confidential, trustworthy support. Therapy, spiritual directors, or ethically bound counselors provide non-judgmental spaces to discuss desire and consequences. Confidentiality helps reduce secrecy and shame. Intentional boundary setting. Clear boundaries, time, public/private separation, transparency with close confidence. Keep relationships healthier. Boundaries should be communicated and mutual. Public accountability without invasive policing. Choosing a small circle of accountable peers who respect privacy but can call out harmful behavior is a middle path. Integration practices. Practices that integrate body and role. Somatic therapy, mindfulness, reflective journaling. Help reconcile embodied desire with the chosen identity. Redefine sacredness. Reframing sexuality as potentially sacred rather than inherently profane can reduce shame and allow the chosen to find intimacy that aligns with their mission. Mythic heroes. In Greek and other mythologies, heroes often engage in sexual relationships that forge alliances or spark tragedy. Sexual immorality is less about sin and more about hubris, overstepping divine or social order. For these chosen figures, sex often symbolizes their vulnerability to fate. Across these traditions, we see two major patterns. Restrictive purity codes, where the chosen's sexual life is heavily controlled to preserve spiritual focus or symbolic sanctity. Integrative models, where sexuality is acknowledged as natural but must be practiced within ethical or ritual boundaries. Both create pressures, but in different ways. Restrictive codes intensify shame and secrecy. Integrative models reduce repression but heighten responsibility. Therapeutic approaches to chosen one sexual struggles. 1. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. CBT helps chosen individuals identify distorted thought patterns like any desire makes me unworthy, or if I fail sexually, I fail entirely. By reframing, they learn that desire itself is not sin. It's behavior, intention, and context that matter. This reduces shame and builds healthier self-regulation. 2. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. Rather than fighting impulses, ACT teaches chosen figures to notice desires without letting them dictate choices. A leader might feel temptation but choose to act in alignment with values, justice, compassion, service. The struggle becomes less about repression and more about fidelity to mission. 3. Psychodynamic/trauma-informed therapy. Some chosen ones are drawn into unhealthy sexual behaviors because of unresolved childhood trauma, unmet attachment needs, or unconscious drives. Exploring these roots can reveal why their sexual life conflicts with their calling, and how healing past wounds can reduce present risk. 4. Somatic and mindfulness practices. Because the chosen often live in their heads, focused on destiny, ideals, expectations, they may disconnect from the body. Mindfulness, breath work, and somatic therapy help them experience desire without panic, shame, or dissociation. By befriending the body, they integrate humanity with destiny. 5. Ethical coaching and accountability structures. Chosen ones benefit from confidential but firm accountability partners, people empowered to question decisions, check boundaries, and prevent secrecy from festering. Unlike punitive oversight, these structures combine compassion with responsibility. Toward integration, rethinking the chosen one's humanity. The struggle with sexual immorality highlights a paradox. The chosen one is elevated as extraordinary, yet they remain profoundly human. When society demands impossible purity, chosen individuals collapse under shame. When they deny their needs, they risk hypocrisy. But when they integrate, acknowledging sexuality as part of their humanity while practicing it with integrity, boundaries, and care, they stop splitting themselves into sacred and profane. The chosen one's real test may not be purity at all costs, but integrity in complexity. Their destiny is not shattered by desire. It is shaped by how they navigate it, honestly, responsibly, and compassionately toward themselves and others. Closing reflection. Chosen ones struggle with sexual morality because they embody tension, the human impulse versus the symbolic role. Across religions, myths, psychology, and modern culture, this tension reappears. Sometimes it destroys leaders and disillusions communities. Other times, it sparks growth, humility, and more human models of holiness. The lesson is not that the chosen must be flawless, but that they must learn to be whole. Sexuality is not an enemy to their calling. Secrecy, exploitation, and disintegration are. The true moral victory is found in aligning personal intimacy with the greater mission in ways that protect dignity, honor consent, and embrace the humanity that makes a chosen one relatable at all. Case sketches, anonymized/fictive for illustration. The prophet who loves. A spiritual leader feeling attraction to a congregant delays acting because of pastoral ethics. Secret correspondence forms, leading to exposure. The aftermath includes broken trust, an ethics investigation, and a leader entering therapy and public apology. Recovery involves enforced boundaries and reconstructing relational trust. The warrior and the healer. A battlefield leader intentionally enters a consensual, age-appropriate, peer relationship with a fellow leader, not subordinate. They establish public transparency and mutual accountability, showing how ethical intimacy can be navigated within asymmetric roles. The celebrity savior. A public figure's sexual misstep becomes tabloid spectacle. The figure alternates denial and confession. The scandal reveals the corrosive effect of celebrity on private moral reasoning and the need for systemic supports for people in high-scrutiny roles. Harm minimization and repair. When harm occurs, prioritize the safety and agency of harmed parties. Admission, apology, tangible repair steps, and restitution, where appropriate, are ethically necessary. Restorative practices, facilitated conversations, community-led reconciliation, and professional mediation can help, but must be voluntary and center those harmed. Legal and institutional frameworks. For institutional chosen figures, clergy, leaders, transparent policies, and independent oversight reduce systemic risk. Broader social reflections. Why we project purity onto leaders. Societies often demand exemplary morality from those who symbolize ideals. But this projection creates unrealistic standards and encourages performative virtue. The role of storytelling. Narratives that portray sexual temptation as inevitable downfall may stigmatize honest conversation and constructive coping. News stories that depict mature, accountable intimacy for chosen people can shift cultural norms. Systemic reform. Institutions should create healthy structures, education about power dynamics, accessible mental health resources, and non-punitive avenues for confession and help. Questions worth exploring next, so we can continue. How do different religious traditions actually script sex and chastity for their chosen? We can compare at least 3 traditions. What clinical models best help individuals with this unique role-related distress? How do gender and sexual orientation change the dynamics of shame and expectation for chosen people? Can fictional narratives be rewritten to reduce hurtful mythic patterns and offer better templates for healthy intimacy? Comparative religious approaches to chosen figures and sexual morality. 1. Christian traditions. In much of Christian thought, the chosen are framed as both holy vessels and human beings under divine scrutiny. Sexuality often sits at the center of tests of purity. Clerical celibacy. Catholicism priests and nuns take vows of celibacy, with the rationale that total devotion to God requires undivided attention. For chosen leaders, sexual immorality is not just personal failure, but desecration of sacred office. This produces both great reverence for those who keep the vow and deep scandal when violations occur. Protestant leaders. While marriage is permitted and sometimes encouraged, sexual missteps by pastors can fracture entire congregations. The chosen one becomes both shepherd and symbol. Lapses undermine the moral authority of the message itself. Mystical strain. Some mystics reinterpret sexual energy as something transfigurable, passion redirected into ecstatic union with God. Here, the struggle isn't about repression, but transformation. 2. Islamic traditions. Islam treats sexuality as a natural part of human life, but within boundaries of marriage and responsibility. Prophets. In Islamic theology, prophets are considered protected from major sins. Their sexuality is framed as honorable and disciplined, often expressed through lawful marriages. This creates a model where chosen figures integrate sexual life with piety rather than renounce it. Leaders and scholars. Those chosen as guides face stricter moral scrutiny. While marriage is encouraged, exploitation of status for sexual gain is harshly condemned. The Quran frequently warns against hypocrisy, which makes private immorality especially dangerous for public leaders. Sufi traditions. Like Christian mystics, some Sufi teachers metaphorize sexual desire as yearning for God, sublimating passion into spiritual longing. But even here, literal misconduct remains a betrayal of trust. 3. Buddhist traditions. Buddhism interprets sexual morality through the lens of attachment and suffering. Monastic vows. Monks and nuns commit to celibacy as a way of freeing the mind from craving. A chosen bodhisattva or teacher who breaks this vow risks both karmic consequences and undermining the Sangha. Lay chosen ones. Some Buddhist leaders are not monastics. For them, sexuality is not forbidden, but must be governed by the precept of avoiding sexual misconduct, e.g., exploitation, coercion, dishonesty. Tantric strands. Certain Vajrayana practices symbolically or ritually integrate sexuality, teaching that desire can be a path to enlightenment if transmuted. Here, the chosen adept confronts sexual morality not by suppression, but by radical reorientation. 4. Indigenous and mythic traditions. Shamanic roles. Many shamans are chosen through visions or crises. Their sexual lives are often subject to taboos, abstinence before rituals, purification after intimacy, or sometimes engaging in sacred sexual rites. Sexual morality is seen not as sin, but as energy management that affects spiritual potency.